Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to the debrief for the 2019 Italian Grand Prix. Well, what a race that was. What didn't we have in the end? We got close racing, wheel-to-wheel action, overtaking, drama, controversy. Just brilliant. Thoroughly enjoyed that one. But before I talk too much about it all, let's have a quick look at the final race result. Charles Leclerc took his second victory in a row with Valtteri Bottas in second and Hamilton in third. Ricciardo came home fourth for Renault with Nico Hülkenberg fifth and Alexander Albon in sixth. Sergio Perez recovered up to seventh place with Max Verstappen just behind in eighth. And then the final points-paying positions went to Antonio Giovinazzi and Lando Norris. Pierre Gasly was 11th with Lance Stroll behind in 12th and Sebastian Vettel down in 13th. More on him later. George Russell ended up 14th with Kimi Raikkonen 15th, Romain Grosjean 16th and Robert Kubica was the last of the classified finishers in 17th. Which all means that your retirements list for Monza was Kevin Magnussen, Daniel Kvyat and Carlos Sainz. Whilst we're looking at the tables and all of that, let's have a run through the current championship standings, starting with the top 10 in the Drivers' Championship. Lewis Hamilton obviously stays top of the table on 284 points, 63 clear of teammate Valtteri Bottas. That's got to be done, come on. Max Verstappen remains third on 185 points, but he's got Charles Leclerc now closing in for company. He's just three further back on 182 and has overtaken teammate Sebastian Vettel, who is on 169. Pierre Gasly remains sixth on 65 with Carlos Sainz on 58, but both Daniel Ricciardo and Alexander Albon have made up ground there on 34 points apiece, and Daniel Kvyat rounds off that top 10 one further back on 33. In the Constructors, Mercedes also remain top on 505 points, and that is 154 clear of Ferrari. Red Bull is still third on 266 with McLaren on 83 and Renault on 65. Toro Rosso, they're 6th on 51 with Racing Point 7th on 46, with Haas 9th on 26 and Williams still have just that 1 point in 10th. On to the teams then, starting with Ferrari and what was a very good drive from Charles Leclerc. I read an article on Autosport this morning talking about how his drive was the equivalent to Fernando Alonso fending off Michael Schumacher at Imola in 2005. And you know, whilst I totally understand the comparison, I do not agree with it. Alonso was fantastic that day and soaked up all the pressure that Schumacher threw at him without a single error. And whilst Leclerc drove extremely well, I don't think anybody would deny that, he did make mistakes and was right on the edge of what is acceptable when it comes to defensive driving. So no, not for me. On those incidents, I'll try and keep it brief because we did talk about them for a big chunk of last night's race reaction, but the cutting of the chicane at turn 1 was not a penalty in my view. He did not gain an advantage, in fact he came off worse from it, and he also didn't maintain a position. Had Lewis Hamilton been alongside or at least making a move, it probably would have been a different outcome. The very late move to defend around Curva Grande didn't sit well with me, I made that clear last night. Ultimately, he waited for Hamilton to make his move before making a last-second defensive move. Then again, flipping that around, we often see that in the midfield with no action taken, so I guess it's not a huge surprise the stewards didn't throw a penalty at him, but from a personal view, I didn't really like that move. And finally, the squeeze he put on Hamilton at the second chicane was probably just over the line, but he was issued with a black and white flag, something the FIA have said will be used as F1's equivalent, if you like, to a yellow card in football. Just basically a warning saying that that wasn't cool, don't do it again or you will get a penalty. That is something the drivers, the teams, the pundits and us as fans have all been screaming for since Canada, some for even longer than that. But more importantly in all of that, the drivers wanted it, and they've been telling the FIA for a long time to just let them race. 12 months ago, maybe even at the start of this season, that would have been a penalty. In fact, actually thinking about it, Max Verstappen was given a penalty, wasn't he, last year in Monza for a similar move on Bottas. So we know that. But Michael Massey, the race director, claimed when talking to Sky yesterday that had Verstappen's move happened under the new administration, he would have got a black and white flag and not that time penalty. Don't get me wrong, I get why Hamilton fans are annoyed, but again, it's something the drivers asked to be implemented, and based on what had already been said by the FIA, it was used correctly in this instance. It's one of those, though, isn't it, that's always going to divide opinion. All of that aside, though, it was a properly strong drive from Leclerc, and just a word on his weekend as a whole, he has shown a ruthless streak both in his on-track fighting and his apparent refusal to give his teammate the toe in quali, a side that I don't believe we'd seen before Monza. It feels, again to me, like that was a huge and defining weekend for both Charles and Ferrari. I will talk more on that though in a video I've got planned to go out before Singapore or hopefully later this week, we'll see. As for his teammates, what a shocker, seriously. Look, I'm not going to tear into him like I did yesterday, but there is no way I can defend that move. First of all, he made another mistake and spun, and that was bad enough. But to rejoin the track right in front of Lance Stroll and hit him into a spin is just inexcusable. I will not defend that, but Seb has tried to. And I'm going to quote him here. "When I spun, I was looking the other way. I saw there was quite a bit of a gap. I knew there would be cars coming, but originally, I thought I would be much quicker rejoining. That took obviously a lot longer. Coming back, I knew that there will be a gap, but I struggled a little bit to get out. I think I was stuck on the grass. I lost a bit of momentum there. It took a bit longer. So certainly not ideal, but I couldn't see anything to the left." Seb received a 10-second stop-go penalty for the move, the harshest penalty that can be handed out in a race, and I think that is more than fair. There are a lot of people on social media, and indeed some in the comment sections to last night's stream, who were saying that he should have been black flagged for it. But Michael Massey has explained why that was not something they considered as, quote, "You can't actually disqualify under the International Sporting Code without the ability to give somebody the opportunity of being heard. So even in that case, a black flag would not be displayed in the race. It would be in a hearing afterwards." If you are interested, by the way, in reading the race director's full reasoning behind that, I've put a link to a Crash.net article in the description. I should also add that Vettel received 3 penalty points on his super license and is now just 3 away from a race ban. He's got to keep it clean in the next few Grand Prix. But again, I don't want to say too much more on Seb. I said loads yesterday, and I think I've made my feelings perfectly clear on that move. Moving on to Mercedes then, and I'm obviously not going to go repeating what I've said earlier about that Hamilton-Leclerc fight, but Lewis has since said that he only backed out of that move and avoided contact because he had the title fight in mind, which is interesting. I know a title isn't won until the math says so, but it is very ambitious of him to call it a title fight. But anyway, he wasn't overly happy post-race, and Toto Wolff also said that he felt Leclerc was over the line with his moves, but Hamilton did later go on to say in a post to Leclerc on social media that there is no drama between the two of them and that he is looking forward to many more battles with him. So, the stewards have made their call, the drivers have moved on, so let's leave all that there. Yeah, right. He was still on for second place, but because he'd been following that Ferrari for so long, his medium tyres ended up going off and his pace began to fall away. He, as a result, eventually locked up at the first chicane, and that allowed Bottas to pass him for second. Lewis did pit soon after that for a new set of soft tyres, well, used softs anyway, but better than the ones he was on, and went on to set the fastest lap and get that bonus point. On Bottas, he pitted later than the leading two and so therefore had fresher tyres, and was, to be fair, able to close them down pretty quickly in the end. I still believe that had Hamilton not made his mistake, Mercedes would have had a call to make if they wanted to win that race. Then again, I suppose if Bottas' tyres were that much fresher, he might have got past Hamilton anyway. Once he had made it into second place, though, he did quickly close down Leclerc and looked set to challenge for the lead. In fact, I honestly did think that was Bottas' race. With the fresher tyres and all of that, I thought he'd cruise up to the back of Leclerc, he'd get that DRS, and he'd go on and take his third win of the year. However, he made a mistake at the first chicane and then later went on to run wide and just catch the edge of the gravel on the exit of the second chicane. And so, obviously, those errors cost him a good chunk of time and really cost him a chance to challenge. What also helped Leclerc fend off both Mercs was the fact that despite the silver arrows having DRS, the Ferrari was still rapid in a straight line and was strong off the final corner, so it made it very difficult for Hamilton or Bottas to get past. Look, I'll say it, even though I refuse to call it a title fight, he may not have taken the win, but Bottas did close the gap by a couple of points to his teammate and his title rival. What a weekend it was for Renault. I was not expecting that at all. They were strong in qualifying and they got to carry that pace over to the race too. Okay, I know, boring side of it, if Vettel hadn't have screwed up and Verstappen hadn't started at the back, they probably wouldn't have finished that high. But those things did happen and they took full advantage of it. Daniel Ricciardo, he did initially fall behind his teammate but was able to take that place back fairly quickly. And come the end of the race, he was well up the road from Hülkenberg. But I guess to be fair to Nico, a big chunk of that lead did come from the Aussie pitting under the virtual safety car, but I'm not taking anything away from Ricciardo, who drove brilliantly all weekend. Nico rounded off that excellent result for the team and managed to hang on to 5th despite Alex Albon closing in. But from what I remember, he never really looked under any threat, even though Albon was just over a second behind as they crossed the line. Can't lie, not a huge amount to say about either driver because they were very much in a race of their own. In fact, Hülkenberg described his race as, quote, straightforward. What I will add though is, as you saw earlier, they are right back in that fight for 4th in the Constructors. Actually, whilst I'm adding things as well, the result does show that the power unit has good, well, power, obviously. So sort that chassis out and they could be a threat to the top 3 next year. I mean, that's ages away yet, I know, and I'm perhaps getting carried away, but the point is the signs are positive on the engine side of things. Great weekend for Renault. As for Red Bull, it was always going to be a difficult weekend for them, and they knew that, hence why Max Verstappen took the penalties he did, which left him at the back of the grid. I think he did well to make his way back up to 8th place, all things considered. Their straight line performance wasn't great, and so making his way through the field was never going to be easy, but he also got caught up in some contact on the opening lap. The onboard shows that he appeared to be caught out by the cars ahead going slower than perhaps he would have expected. From the long shot, it looks like a Toro Rosso just tagged the back of a Haas, which in turn caused those behind to slow, and Max had to react to avoid smashing into the back of Perez. However, whilst he was trying to avoid him, he did still just tag the Racing Point's rear tyre, and that caused front wing damage. As a result of all of that, he had to pit early, and that just compromised his race even further. But he got some good moves done, and like I say, 8th is pretty decent considering everything that went on. Singapore should suit Red Bull much better, so I'm pretty confident we will see him back at the sharp end of the grid next time around, but Spa and Monza are simply not Red Bull tracks. On Alex Albon, he obviously suffered with the same straight line deficit as his teammate, so there's no need to go on about that one anymore. But he was involved in some moments during the race, one of which saw him given a 5-second time penalty. He went for a move on Magnussen in the second chicane. It was a good aggressive move as well, but he couldn't slow the car down, cut the corner and failed to return the position, and that is a slam dunk penalty all day long. He also had contact with Carlos Sainz through the first Lesmo. The two of them were having a really great scrap, with Albon going for a Ricciardo-esque dive bomb again at that second chicane, but Sainz managed to get the better exit and got alongside and had the inside line for that next corner. Alex did try to hang it around the outside, but Sainz put the squeeze on, contact was made and Albon ended up in the gravel. No penalty, by the way, just throwing that in there. But I do wonder, with the benefit of hindsight, if that opportunity throws itself up again, whether he'd maybe back off and concede that corner rather than losing time and end up in the gravel. All in all, though, it was always going to be a case of damage limitation for Red Bull in Italy, and I guess that is exactly what they did. Like I say, though, Singapore should suit them very nicely. What a drive from Sergio Perez. Said that more than a few times. He started down in 18th, and as you saw earlier, managed to cross the line in 7th. I mean, what can you say? It is just the sort of thing we've come to expect from Checo over the years. It's what he does. He's great at managing his tyres, he's willing to go for moves, and he's just a quick guy. Huge credit deserved there. Now, of course, he was one of those drivers who benefited from being able to pit under the virtual safety car, but still a seriously good drive. He apparently, according to a lot of the post-race stuff, had a cracking battle with Verstappen in the latter stages of the race, and the Dutchman was only 0.6 of a second behind the Racing Point as they went across the line at the end. I mean, I know the World Feed had to focus on the lead battle, but it would be cool to watch that fight back, so hopefully some footage will come out soon. His teammate had a mixed weekend. Lance Stroll made it through to Q3 again in Monza. That's a track he seems to love in qualifying, and he was looking good for some points as well in the race. However, as covered earlier, he was hit by Vettel as the Ferrari tried to rejoin the track and was put into a spin. Stroll was angry over team radio and after the race as well, yet he did almost exactly the same thing by rejoining the track and almost hitting Pierre Gasly, leaving a Toro Rosso with no option but to head into the gravel. Now, I said almost exactly the same because there was one key difference. There was no contact, which is why Stroll only got a drive-through penalty rather than a 10-second stop-go. Whereas Vettel's was for 2 incidents, one for rejoining the track unsafely, and then another for causing a collision. That has been confirmed by the race director, by the way. Both Stroll and Otmar Safnauer believe the penalty was harsh, and that's because Lance was put in that position through no fault of his own. And do you know what? I get it. But however he ended up in that position, he still came back onto the track in a dangerous manner and nearly wiped out Gasly. So I believe the penalties for both drivers were spot on. Really pleased for Antonio Giovinazzi after he grabbed 2 points at his home Grand Prix. He drove solidly as well all race and did manage to keep his cool under pressure from Lando Norris, who was only a 1.5 seconds behind come the end of the race. We didn't see much of him, but like I said last week, that's not always a bad thing. It means they've kept themselves out of trouble. But from what we did see, I can't really fault him at all, and I do feel like he's growing into this season. It looks like he's going to keep that seat for next year, but even so, it's always good to keep proving what you can do to the team. Obviously, he was more than happy to pick up his best finish in front of the Italian crowd, and I really do hope he can kick on from here and continue his progress. On the other side of the garage, though, it was a fairly miserable weekend all round for Kimi Raikkonen, wasn't it? He crashed out in practice and then went on to crash in quali, which put him right on the back foot for the race because he needed a new gearbox, and the team also fitted a different spec of power unit, which meant that he had to start from the pit lane again. Does feel like Kimi spent a lot of time starting from the pit lane this year, although it's probably only like 2 or 3, but whatever. To make things even worse though, the team fitted the incorrect tyres at the start of the race, and the Finn was therefore hit with a 10-second stop-go penalty, which is the standard penalty for that kind of rule breach. So Alfa thought that as he was starting from the pit lane, Kimi could put on a nice new set of boots to at least allow them to take advantage of a decent strategy. However, they were obviously wrong, and as Kimi had made it through to Q3, he should have started on the tyres he used in Q2. That was more or less race done at that point, but as daft as it might seem to some, including me, they are the black and white rules, and it's not one of those that's open to interpretation. You either have the right tyres fitted or you don't. I just find it odd that, as he had broken part Ferme rules, they could have changed everything on that car, as in he could drive a totally different spec of everything, yet he still has to use his Q tyres. But anyway, like I say, the rule is clear on that one. It wasn't the best of weekends for McLaren. Lando Norris did manage to pick up that final point, though, having started down in 16th, so a good recovery. And just looking at his post-race quotes, Lando did point to the fact that they had tried the undercut on Perez, but the chances of jumping in with that went out the window when the VSC was deployed. But he also added that he didn't feel they had the pace to do much more. I don't think 16th to 10th is a bad race at all, so absolutely credit for that. Carlos Sainz, as I said earlier, had a good scrap with Alexander Albon, and to be fair, looked like he was on for some good points as well. And Carlos said after the race that he felt they could have taken 6th place. However, at his pit stop, the right front wheel was not fitted correctly, and so as he exited the pit lane, had to pull over and retire. As is to be expected with these things, the team were investigated for the unsafe release and received a €5,000 fine. It's a shame for Sainz and for McLaren because he was running really well to that point. On to Toro Rosso then, and Pierre Gasly, as I've already gone over, got caught up in that Vettel-Stroll chaos, which he believes cost him points. And looking at the final results, he could well be right. After all, he was only 1.8 seconds behind Norris in 10th and a further 1.5 behind 9th place Giovinazzi. So perhaps 9th was on the cards for him. I mean, we'll never really know. But I did time it when watching the highlights, and excluding the fact that he had to slow for Stroll and just looking at how long he was in the gravel, he lost at least 6 seconds. It's definitely more than that, but the highlights cut off before he rejoined, so it's at least 6 seconds. Very frustrating, and do you know what? Pierre just cannot seem to catch a break at the moment, can he? Daniel Kvyat retired from the race just after his pit stop with smoke coming from the back of his Toro Rosso. That's bad enough, but the fact he was running as high as 6th at one point, and after his stop rejoined in 8th, it's a double slap in the face for him. It turned out that it was an oil leak, that's according to Toro Rosso's post-race press release, and so as a result, after looking at the data, the team told him to stop on track. It was one of those Sundays where neither driver really did an awful lot wrong, but at the same time nothing seemed to go their way, and the luck was not on their side because I really feel like looking at it, they could have been on for double points. Again though, we'll never really know. Williams once again not last in this rundown. They had a pretty decent race actually. George Russell started 14th and finished there as well, and although there are reasons behind that, DNFs and penalties, I still think, like I said last night, that's a mini win for them. Russell says he was surprised by the team's pace in Monza and is taking that positive away from the weekend. It was almost 13th place for George though. However, unfortunately for him, Vettel passed him on the final lap. Not a huge surprise, a Ferrari versus a Williams. Robert Kubica described his weekend as, quote, up and down. He was running up in 13th at one point and both drivers were involved in some battling early doors. However, as I guess you'd expect in a Williams, he did begin to fall through the field as the race went on, but he also had to make a second pit stop due to a flat-spotted tyre which he got whilst fighting Romain Grosjean. Looking at it from a team perspective, again, both drivers finished and they keep that 100% record for another weekend. Can they stretch it to the end of the season? Knock on wood. And finally, Haas, what can I say, really? Just another thoroughly miserable Sunday for them. That being said, things were looking good for Magnussen early on, and he was showing some okay pace. Certainly better than we've seen at some races recently. He was also involved in some good scraps. However, following a lock-up, his car became, quote, difficult to drive, that's in Gunther Steiner's words, and he eventually had to retire with a hydraulic issue, and all of that solid work was undone. Romain Grosjean, it turns out, was the driver hit from behind at the first corner by a Toro Rosso, and that left his car out of balance. He later ended up spinning at Ascari. Whether that was just driver error or was related to that balance issue, I don't know. I've not seen anything to confirm it either way, but I would assume it was at least a factor. He pitted after that spin with Roman saying that he asked the team to, quote, remove a fair bit of aero balance as the car was very much on the nose. I don't know what to say about Haas because I just feel like I'd be repeating what I've said for the last few races. But I can't help but get the feeling that they can't wait for this season to be over. As a fan though, I don't want this season to be over because it's rapidly turning into a belter. 6 properly good races in a row. Come on Singapore, let's make it 7. That is it then for the Italian Grand Prix debrief, but as always behind the eye at the top right of the screen, you can rate the race by voting in the poll. And also, don't forget that you can let me know your thoughts on the race down in the comment section. Now, I will be back soon with more content as ever, but in the meantime, don't forget that you can follow me over on social media and all of the links you need for that are in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.